All right. So before we jump into some Unity stuff, I want to talk about a couple of cool things that are happening today in our industry. And as technologists, we should stay ahead of, stay on top of. So I'm going to write down three different tools. And I'm going to talk through those tools in terms of a project that I worked on because I found a couple of interesting use cases for some of these tools. So let me hide this. Now, well, let's write them down here. So we're going to call these guys AI tools for developers. All right. Number one rule. Think of it as us wielding a programming language through the help of AI. Now, here's an interesting thing, discussion I had with Dr. Wall yesterday. So have any of you, actually, most of you probably have Dr. Wall for the intro CS class, right? All right, so he teaches most of our cybersecurity courses. Now, oh, when I say white hat hacker, do you know what I mean by that? What do I mean by white hat hacker? Okay. So we have good guys and bad guys, right? So the bad guys are black hat hackers. So they're the ones who are using all of the tools that allow you to break through network security or read packets or decrypt things and all sorts of other stuff. White hat hackers are people who are let's call them the good guys. They have to learn what the bad guys are doing so that they can help companies play defense against that. All right. So keep that in mind as we're kind of talking about this is, as computer scientists, and specifically as you're learning this at a Christian university, we have to kind of lead with ethics. We have to consider, are we abusing these tools? We want to use the tools to our benefit. As students, though, don't use these tools to bypass the learning process. That's the real danger we live in today. That's how good some of these tools have gotten, is that, man, with your imagination and an enter key, a ridiculous amount can be accomplished, as I'll talk about today. But really try to think about that white hat hacker idea here is the more you dive in and understand how these tools work and what they are capable of, not necessarily, I mean, at the end of the day, I don't care if you just, uh, frankly, you could have probably used one of these tools, given it the link to Rollerball, and said, do this, and it would have. One prompt. Stupid what some of these things are capable of. Okay, but we need to know what these tools can and can't do, what they can be trusted for, so that when we are giving advice to someone and helping them pick the right tool for the job, we know what we can bring to the table for solving a problem. We also know which tools to keep an eye on as they continue to evolve and kind of compete with each other, because we have this new competition that's kind of been born in the last well, certainly within the last month. That is actually pretty exciting for software engineers. And it's a matter of how do we wield these things correctly. So I want us to think about this in terms of we're white hat hackers, but instead of us looking at cybersecurity, closing holes and things like that, instead we're looking at where are AI tools currently, who's using what are the pitfalls of those things, and where can they be trusted? And sometimes you can send these agents, you've maybe heard of agentic AI. So it's another buzzword we throw out there, agentic AI. How many of you have heard that phrase-ish, something with agents or agentic or AI agents. What is an AI agent? So this is like most technology things, is we have these fancy sounding terms, yet we don't necessarily know what it really means. Go ahead. You were going to make a bad guess?
Yeah, I was going to take a great guess.
Oh, okay. Go ahead. By the way, I always appreciate you being a good sport. That's why I pick on you.
But
See how I can lie and be nice and not even break a. All right, go ahead. Sorry.
we're volleyball had to clear like a round, which kind of influenced by AI, and then also what we were creating our edge, he had to be an AI agent. So like AI agents could be the things that we're working with that AI.
Okay. So you're connecting it to our Unity thing, which is good. So you had a nav mesh agent, right? You created this nav mesh, which is effectively what kind of figured out the pathways that weren't going to have them walk through walls and stuff like that, even though he probably sometimes still did. Takes a little cheat sheet at the corner, makes his way through there. But then you had the nav mesh agents, which was your guy that you weren't controlling. So the chaser, the nav mesh agent would chase your guy following that nav mesh, right? To sort of go around obstacles to kind of chase them. But what did the idea of him being an agent mean? So when we say nav mesh agent, what does that mean? Go ahead.
Like an instance of the AI, like a siloed off version of what the AI is capable of, but not the entire.
Okay, I'm not sure agent necessarily implies sandboxed. It probably should. We'll talk about that today, but I don't think agent implies that. Now, so let's take it away from technology. How many of you have ever used a travel agent or can imagine what a travel agent might do? So when we think of a travel agent, what do they do for us? Go ahead.
They like schedule and like they think about our travel so we don't have to.
Yeah, they do all the heavy lifting for us. So, for example, my wife doesn't trust anyone, therefore she doesn't trust travel agents. But throwing that out the window, which becomes a very funny thing in our household, because I am overly trustworthy of technology because I'm fine with just reinstalling an OS. She won't touch anything. She won't download TikTok because I guess the Chinese are looking or whatever. She doesn't even say that. It's more just she's worried about something. And my wife is a very high anxiety person, so I try to keep her drugged up most of the time. Well, sometimes I loosen it a little bit if I need her to do chores. All right. So, um, so when we think about a travel agent, usually we give that person some instructions, right? So sometimes I will talk to travel agents and let them go and do a lot of the heavy lifting for us. And then my wife will do her own thing, and that way I'm knowledgeable about the situation. And then when all is said and done, maybe we throw the booking to the travel agent. Chances are they're going to either get the same deal as we were able to find, or they might give us an extra $100 in onboard credit or something on the ship. But then they get credit for doing the work. So always consider that if you're going to use and abuse someone to do research for you, if it doesn't hurt you, give them the kickback, right? so they do the work. My wife then makes the decision. Once she decides that, okay, this is good, then we book through the travel agent. But in any case, when we think about an agent, we give them a prompt, right? We say, hey, I am looking for, so I'll give you the real example. My wife and I always go away over Christmas and New Year's historically. So we do a cruise during that break. We used to be away for 7 weeks. We just go to an island somewhere, but now we do cruises, and usually we're gone for 14 to 19 days or something like that. But we were going to do something a little different this year. We decided, okay, well, maybe we go earlier in December or at the beginning of January rather than over Christmas and New Year's, save some money, have fewer kids on the cruises, all sorts of things. So we had a window. So I went to the travel agent. I said, okay, I have December 2nd through January 10th. That's our window. I want to go on a minimum of 10, maximum of 17-day cruise, which might be a single cruise or might be individual cruises back to back, where the rooms have to be the same room in both cruises. So you're given constraints, right? Okay. So, because my wife doesn't like changing rooms. So if we're on the same cruise 2 weeks in a row, so 7 days, you go out, come back, and you stay on the ship and you go out and back again for the next 7 days, but she doesn't want to switch rooms. So the same room has to be available in back-to-back cruises. So you give that travel agent all your constraints, and then they go to work for you. And what they come back with is the solution or some options that meet your requirements. Okay. So when we think about agents, they are going to go off and do work for us on our behalf and bring back whatever the appropriate solution to that problem is. Make some sense? All right. So whenever you hear somebody talking about agentic AI, what they're really talking about is having something that is more than just a chat GPT prompt where you ask it a question, it gives you a response. Now, we've almost been limping towards agentic type stuff with these various AIs where maybe you can upload an Excel document or upload a PowerPoint or upload a long PDF and say, summarize this for me, right? Or give it a website URL and say, summarize this page for me. Another interesting thing, if you haven't seen it, um, well, this is something that Logan and I are working on, and that's we're working with a company that has startup companies who are pitching for angel investments. They want money, and they have to pitch why their thing deserves an investment from the angel investors. And so I'm an angel investor for a group. Logan is working with that group to replace the human that's currently doing their vetting, that takes like a week to do it and puts together this report after watching hours of YouTube videos and things like that. So first of all, if you watch YouTube, and I watch a lot of documentaries or AI stuff, keeping up on the latest things. Well, now there's a little, what is it that I'm watching? I'll tell you if it's true. You said, what did you say? Oh, subtitles, yeah. Oh, I thought you said something funny, like some kind of videos I'm likely watching on YouTube. Oh, my wife watches all the cruise things, so I hear it in the background. I do my version of that is AI tools and stuff that's helping me with the things I'm doing. Um, but in any case, uh, uh, what was I? Oh, yeah, YouTube. So YouTube recently released this within the last several months. Is now on a YouTube video. There's it looks like a little diamond. That's the Gemini logo. If you click that, and then let's say you're looking at a 4-hour video and you say, summarize the highlights of this video. In 30 seconds, it'll give you this whole thing, bulleted list of what this video is about with clickable timestamps. So you can jump in and only learn about the things that you actually care about from there. It lets you process through these videos quickly without you having to sit there and watch for 4 hours, stuff like that. So these are things that are already being integrated into our tools. Zoom has a AI flippy dealy thingy. Hold on, okay. Yeah. I just wanted to make sure I was sharing my screen and recording. Even I know I haven't actually started doing anything. For the online people, I wanted to make sure they weren't just staring at nothing. So in any case, we've already noticed that every single website we go to, every single tool we're using has put some kind of AI thing in there. And as computer scientists, we want to be able to vet what is the use of this AI thing. Are they putting this there just to say, hey, we have AI? Are they putting it there to actually be of value? So for example, a good thing you might do with the Zoom AI companion is at the end of a video, say, summarize this lecture, something like that. Tell me the bullet points of the things that Littman said were important or whatever. Separate those by computer science topics and other, because I say other interesting things, but I've been known to meander. Yeah, I've been known to meander. But I think I usually say interesting stuff. Just I stay on top of things so much that we move away from things. And I mean, then I have the weird side quest stuff that gets a little bit funky, but you get what I'm saying. All right. Um, so we have all these interesting tools out there. Now, when we think about agentic AIs, these are the new cool kid things. We've been asking ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini to do heavy lifting stuff for us that have been saving us time for a long time. But what it doesn't necessarily do is it doesn't necessarily do 10 steps in a row. Do this, then this, then this, then this, then this. We have to guide it along those routes, right? Now, in the last 6 months or so, we've been seeing more and more, at least available to the normal consumers, the thinking models, right? The ones that have the little brain next to it, right? That's kind of the half step towards agentic models. So, what the thinking models have started doing is they've been starting to get a game plan together for how am I going to get you the best answer and probably a more thorough answer, but it's still only doing certain things for you. And in some cases, it has to stop short of using tools. Now, if you use ChatGPT or any of those, you've probably started noticing if, like, for instance, on a PC or at least on the Mac, I think ChatGPT is available for both, isn't it? ChatGPT has a local application that runs on Windows. You don't have to access it through the web, right? Is that true? Well, whatever. The Mac application for it has a little thing that lets me click on it and attach tools. A lot of times it'll automatically do this. It'll attach to my terminal. For example, I do a lot of stuff in the command line. We'll be looking at something today. Um, so it'll attach these different things so it could pull information in. Gemini can attach to like your Gmail. So if I have, and this was related to this weekend, some of the things it was pulling from my email. But so you can start having these AI tools that we've been used to using. We can start having them get some limited access to things that are on our computer, but it's not taking over the computer at this point in time. We're hobbling into that access. All right. So we've been seeing this move towards agentic stuff in little tiny bits and pieces for a little bit now. But what has been the limiting factor for when we think of a travel agent, for example? A travel agent is like they probably have access to, better booking software or something like that, so they can probably more easily find, for example, back-to-back rooms on the same cruise ship in back-to-back weeks that's available by going into their tools that maybe have better search capabilities for that. Whereas, consumers have to go in, and my wife and I will sit right next to each other. We'll go in into the separate weeks and pretend like we're booking and find the rooms that are available both times. It's not that big of a deal. Um, but they might have better tools for it. But they're using a normal computer just like we're using, right? They have spreadsheets and all this stuff. So it's a human being going in and doing that work on a computer. So we might say one of the weaknesses or one of the things that we've been bumping into with these agentic type, well, agentic light. Although if you've noticed in ChatGPT, now there's a button for agent mode. Have you seen that? So I think it's been there for a while, at least on the application. So you can click on agent mode. Now you have a pretty small quota for agent. And I'm on the paid ChatGPT. I paid like, the $20 a month one, not the pro one. So if you're on the free one, it's possible agent mode's not even there. On the plus one, it feels like about an hour of agent mode per billing cycle. Enough to mess with it, but not enough to like, hey, I'm using this every single day. Instead, they say, give us more money if you want to use this more. But this is starting to limp towards the idea of more agentic stuff. So what happens is when you switch to agent mode inside of something like ChatGPT, it's not using your computer, but what it does is it creates this sandbox kind of virtual machine up in the cloud. and it's using that guy. So it's opening up web browsers and doing research for you and all this stuff, clicking on things in websites. Not just looking at a certain URL and telling you what, summarizing what's there. It literally is using the web pages and clicking around on it and doing things like that. Pretty cool stuff. Now, but you still have this limitation that it's still locked inside of the application or locked into the capabilities that live up in the sandbox they built you, the virtual machine they built you up in the cloud, so that it can't get into too much trouble, right? The worst that happens is it clicks around on a website where you don't have the ability to go up into the cloud and interact with that to kind of set it up in the right place. Like you can't log into a website first and then say, okay, you could take it over from here. You don't have the ability to do that. So really we're looking at, well, how do we, if we're willing to roll the dice, how do we get outside of the application and gain access directly to what's on our computer? All of our data, all of our folders, all of those things, or a subset of those things that we want to have some control over, but still it has access to things on our computer that we didn't give it access to before. So agentic AI, some examples of these guys that we've seen. I'm going to give you a workflow of kind of what I use when I'm doing what's called pair coding. Have you heard of pair coding before? So when you go out into industry, you might do pair coding, especially if you're a junior software engineer. They might pair you up with like a senior software engineer, and you might both sit at the same computer and work on the problem in tandem. All right, where maybe the senior engineer sits there and maybe does some of the heavy lifting stuff, introducing, the company's workflow and stuff to the person. And then once they're convinced that the junior engineer has enough to go on, they might say, okay, here's this grunt work I want you to work on. I'm going to see a movie. So you work on this. So you get him working on it, you leave. So pair coding is typically, we're going to say we'll call it 2+ coders working on the same computer at the same time as whatever, at the same time to accomplish tasks where there typically is a more advanced user and a new user who is learning the ropes. And they each participate in the way that they can best help, something like that. All right, so that's what pair coding is. So for pair coding, I use a tool called Cursor. So Cursor, so we talked about VS Code last class. So remind me, what kind of tool is VS Code? If you had to, there was a multiple choice quiz and it gave you a whole bunch of options for VS Code. What kind of thing is VS Code? ID, what's an ID? Okay, so an ID is an integrated development environment. I might even say that VS Code is almost at a level above that, like newer, better than that. Because historically, IDEs were just text editors that had some quality of life stuff. For example, you've seen when I'm here inside of Keynote that sometimes it capitalizes stuff I don't want it to capitalize, that kind of stuff. An IDE built for coders assumes you're going to be typing weird stuff. It doesn't try to do any of that. It also historically lets you do command completion stuff and things like that. Where you're in the middle of typing system dot, and then it gives you the out, it gives you the println, that kind of stuff. But historically, when you were working with IDs, like right now, we're learning a new IDE, Unity. So Unity is an IDE that brings several pieces of the puzzle together. We have our interface design. we have our coding piece. This is going to take us down the path of our model view controller, our next design pattern. We learned about singletons. Now we're going to talk about model view controllers after, probably next class. But model view controller basically says it's a good idea to keep your data in one place, your user interface in another place, and your coding logic in a third place. Keep those separate and then bring them together. Unity is a tool that brings them together. You have your user interface design through their drag and drop tool thing. You have the coding place where you create the scripts, you double click on it, and it takes you to a different location to work on the coding stuff. And then you haven't done database stuff yet, but you would also keep your data separate, either in files or using the computer's file system or a database in the cloud or a local database, whatever it is. But MVC says it's a good idea to separate those three major components of an application rather than mix them all together. Historically, that was kind of a weakness of the programming language PHP. PHP was designed for web stuff. So in the early days of PHP, if you opened up, I am talking here, you shut up. See, Zoom Zoom doesn't even know if I was talking to a human or my watch, but it was a human, by the way. Well, it's going to be soon when I yell at her. Yeah, so in any case, it's a good idea to keep those things separate because in the early days of PHP, you would have your user interface and your HTML stuff and your JavaScript, all of it in one spaghetti code file where it was difficult to work with. And then PHP started adding in templates. So you could take your user interface out and then link in a template thing, and then your code just referenced the templates and said, put this variable here, put this variable here, so on and so forth. So we've seen MVC grow out of a problem. So a lot of these design patterns came from, some kind of sticking point, a pain point in the development process that wasn't a pain point early on. When PHP first came out, websites were not as complex as they are today. Interfaces were not as complex. So this wasn't really a problem in the early days of PHP. It wasn't that messy. But then as your number of lines of code went from 200 to 2,000 and then to 200,000, it's a problem. So we got to start separating those things. So we see it with Unity. We see it with Android Studio. Android Studio says, hey, design your interface for your Android app. Here's where your code lives for Android app. Hey, you want to connect to Google Cloud? We have a button for that, because Android is a Google thing. Microsoft will connect to iCloud and their database stuff. Or rather, Microsoft will connect to .NET Azure Cloud. If you're doing iPhone development, Xcode will connect to Apple's local data store or iCloud stuff. They have access to their ecosystems. So anyways, VS Code is a text editor that is code aware, so it doesn't try to capitalize stuff for you, but it's language agnostic. All right, so when you go into Visual Studio, you're working with a core language. When you go into, any of these, you're working with a built-in language, where VS Code doesn't say it's made for any language. I think probably, actually, I'm not sure there's any true language built into it. I know there's knowledge of syntax, but if you want to run the programs, you have to bring in a module to run those programs locally in VS Code. So VS Code tends to be a hub, right? You have your code stuff here, and then, yeah, you can go outside of that and run your code if you want to, or if you, plug in the Python module, which possibly comes with it today. I don't know, but there might be a couple of built-in modules for popular uses, but regardless, you install your Python module that knows how to talk to the locally installed Python on your computer, so that you just get the little play button to run your Python script instead of having to run it out from the terminal. So it's doing these things for you. VS Code is also called a pseudo open source project. So lots of other tools use VS Code as our starting point. Cursor is one of these. So Cursor is effectively VS Code with agentic programming built into it. So it uses VS Code as the editor, but then creates, has an agent piece that allows you to, let's see, we're rolling the dice here on what I actually have up and running in Cursor. Oh, this is actually an okay one. And this will be related to our thing. But so this is Cursor. This is VS Code. This is just my files over here on the left. So this is a pretty cheap one. I was writing programs to walk the websites to get back-to-back rooms that were available. But in any case, over here is kind of like your chat GPT type thing. And I'm in agent mode. There's also a plan mode, which won't actually do the work, but it'll plan it all out for you, tell you all the steps. That's actually pretty handy if you want to take it to another tool that might follow those steps even better. But you have agent mode, you have plan mode, whatever. Ask is just like using ChatGPT. But usually you're in agent mode here, and then you can pick your model. So here's all the models built into it. So, Composer is their built-in model. Here's GPT-5.3 Codex, Sonnet, Opus 4.6 Max, blah, blah, blah. Some of these have costs, some of them don't. Gemini 3.1 Pro, Grok code. So it has these models that are already built into it. I actually have to use Auto right now, which does use those better things, but I've burned through my tokens for using specific models. But in any case, that's what Cursor is. So Cursor is for pair programming. So I'm doing some of the work, he's doing some of the work, and our interface is through this agent model thing over here where I can type in what I want that junior programmer to go do for me. And so one thing you can do is you can give it prompts over here and just say, hey, you got full control. Build my whole project. You can open up any files you want, change any files you want, all this stuff. No problem within this directory. It doesn't go outside of that directory, but within this directory, you can create files, it can delete files, it can change files. Now, if you're a beginning programmer or an intermediate programmer, a lot of this stuff is pretty intimidating, right? So now you have this thing building a project with 30 source code files, multiple folders. You're not an advanced user at this point. You don't know what it's doing, right? You need to go make a little change. You're hunting through things you don't understand, right? I will often use Cursor to build out the initial skeleton of a project. And then I'll go through and make sure I see how it's building it. A lot of times I will dictate the kinds of technologies I wanted to use. I want you to use Python. I want to use Fast API as my backend API engine, things like that. I'll dictate the technologies that I wanted to use. I'll let it build the initial project, but from that point forward, I typically work within an individual file. And I'll ask it to write a function that does this, do this for me, that kind of stuff. Now, I found an interesting use for Cursor this weekend that I'm gonna swing back onto because I'm gonna use this one thing because I use 3 different tools to try to accomplish the same thing, and the journey was pretty interesting. So, anyways, that's what Cursor is. I would say Cursor is pair programming with an agentic flair. So your junior coder, the person you're pair programming with, is not a person, it's a coding agent that you can rely on shockingly heavily, but it's your partner in crime, not just doing everything for you. You can let it do everything for you and just prompt engineer your entire application. But then what ends up happening is you get a false sense of competence because you have a working application and you know that you could have never built that yourself, regardless of how much time you had. Where you really want to get to the point is where you can say, I know I could have built that myself. I just didn't want to. That's when these agents become really powerful because it's like, oh yeah, I could have spent 200 hours on that, or I could have just gotten you going and gone and made lunch. And when I came back in 30 minutes, you've been done for 20. Pretty impressive stuff. So this is pair programming. So cursor, we're going to say, is an example of pair programming, pair coding. All right, now we have something called, uh, let's see, how do I want to reference this? Well, I don't even know how to reference this. We're just going to call it by name. Actually, let's take you through a little bit of the history. It started off as Claudebot. So if you ever were on YouTube searching for any AI stuff and you saw, like right now, if you go onto YouTube and you just type in AI, what you are very likely to see is a wall of things about a tool called OpenClaw and all of those algorithm things where it's like, is such and such the OpenClaw killer, things like that. But everything's about OpenClaw right now. So it started off as Claudebot. And don't confuse this. This becomes an interesting thing with the AI world right now, is so many things we don't know who owns what. And we don't know. So when you see Claudebot, you might in your mind think, oh, this must be related to, well, especially when you hear someone say it. When you see it spelled different than Claude, Claud, which is a ChatGPT competitor made by a company called Anthropic. That's not the same company that made this. This was made by some guy. Somebody, like any one of us, sat there and said, oh, I'm going to write this. For all we know, he used cursors, something to write it. I don't know if that's come out. That'd be pretty interesting. But he created this tool called Claudebot, which is a local agent that runs on your computer that you install, you configure, and I'll show you that here in a second. But what happened is as it became really, really, really popular, and it does seem like Claudebot was designed with Claude as its preferred brain. So think of Claudebot as this agent program, almost like you're buying a software robot. All right, lives on your computer, but he can't do anything until you install a brain. How do you install a brain? Well, you pick which model you want to use. You go and get an API key for that model. You drop that model in, give it its API key, and then you start paying a bill. And it's expensive. If you put in the most capable models, ChatGPT 5.4 or whatever, Claude, Opus 4.6, you will get over $100 in no time. You'll feel like I barely did anything with this and I'm just breaking the bank. Yeah, but it didn't break my bank. So I can throw things at, but yeah, I mean, so I've messed with it quite a bit, changing out models. I'm using my own local models, using something called Olama to run my own local LLMs, which are not going to be as good as what you can get from the providers out there. But some of those local LLMs, if your software can run it, if your hardware rather can run it, can get pretty close to some of the models that are out there. So what I was using pretty heavily is I was using the main brain for Claudebot or OpenClaw is what it's called now. I was picking ChatGPT 5 Mini because that's cheap. You could use that all day long and your bill was going to be like $7-8 or something like that. But you were limited by how smart that brain was, what it could do, what it couldn't do. And ChatGPT 5 Mini is pretty powerful. You couldn't run anything on your computer that is that powerful. You certainly can't run any of the big boy models on your computer. I mean, my computer has 128 gigs of RAM in it, and typically your RAM, your VRAM, the RAM associated with your graphics card, is the limiting factor, the main limiting factor of running your own local large language models, because you need to have the whole model fit into your video RAM. When you go out and get those really expensive graphics cards from like NVIDIA, so for instance, down the AI lab, we have a computer called Solomon, and Solomon has two NVIDIA 3090 Ti graphics cards. Each one of those guys has 24 gigabytes of VRAM. So with two of them, we have 48 gigabytes of VRAM. That means any model that we're going to run must fit within 48 gigabytes of VRAM. That's a lot of pretty good local models, but nothing compared to what's out there in the cloud. My computer has 128 gigs of regular RAM. It just so happens that the architecture that Apple uses, which everybody else is going to be using soon enough, they're already transitioning to it, uses something called unified memory, which means your graphics card and your computer itself share the same pool of memory. So I have effectively 128 gigabytes of VRAM as well on this computer, so I can run larger models. There is more to it than just that, because running a model means that you technically can send it a prompt. It does not tell you how quickly it's going to run that prompt. Okay. The GPU that's part of Apple's infrastructure are very powerful given that they fit inside of a form factor that's thin like this, right? So, Apple will get up on stage and say, it's right there with the best that NVIDIA has. It's right there with probably NVIDIA's low-end prosumer line, which is really good. But NVIDIA's high-end things have a zillion things called CUDA cores. So these are small little floating point processors and CUDA is a technology that our AI models heavily take advantage of. Things like TensorFlow and, whatever. A lot of the AI stuff that deals with tensors. So CUDA is the fastest technology. Apple has started there's a project called MPS, which is kind of CUDA cores for Mac stuff, and it's gotten really, really good. So MPS plus a lot of RAM probably currently trumps anything that you could run on a prosumer computer throwing NVIDIA GPUs into. It's fast enough for that. It's not going to compete once you get up to NVIDIA's made for AI H100s, A100. These things are $40,000. A whole different ball game. Those are enterprise installs for AI. So it's not going to compete with that. But in any case, when you hear Claude bot, it sounds like Claude. And as this guy became really, really, really popular and had all sorts of stuff all over the internet, you had people saying, "Oh, I'm spending $200 a month and I've automated my business is making zillions of dollars." Then you had this other guy over there that said, "Hey, I've been using it to do automatic stock trading for me and I've lost my shirt. I've lost everything." Because it is a complicated program to mess with, and there are very few guardrails. You can get in a lot. It's fun, but you might want to limit the access to it. So the current cool thing everybody's doing is they're getting a Mac Mini and installing OpenClaw on that. So that's your little sandboxed world. And you only put things on that and give that thing access to the things you want it to do. So it has its own little playground. I have, I started off having it run on my mom's old laptop that I replaced, but now I pretty much just throw everything to the wind. I run everything local on this computer. It just has access to everything. It's awesome. So anyways, Anthropic ended up not liking the name. There was too much heat, right? Go ahead.
So, yeah, they pretty much just like every other computer, like screen.
There eventually will be a screen, but you basically have machines that are the most powerful GPU you've ever heard of, linked together by the thousands to train and run models like ChatGPT.
Can't like go on the web or anything or like see.
You have cloud access to those if you want to train your own models. Yeah, and they'll charge you for it, but it's going to be way cheaper than. And like if you wanted to actually build and run your own, let's say OpenAI, the makers of ChatGPT, let's say they handed you the trained model for ChatGPT 5.4, latest ChatGPT. I mean, I don't know the exact number, but I'm just going to round down and say you probably need 25,000 H100 AI systems hooked in parallel to run that for all. I mean, let me step back for a second and finish the conversation about Olama. So, like on my computer here, I can run shockingly large models on my computer. I can run the biggest DeepSeek model, which is the Chinese AI killer or whatever thing. I can run that locally on my computer. There's two issues with that though. It will run, which means it'll launch into memory. But now, and I'm not training it, it's already trained. So I don't have to use my horsepower to train the thing. So I have this model that's been trained with all this technology, whatever. And I just happen to have a ton of VRAM, so I can launch it. But now when I give it a prompt, I would say it probably takes between 45 seconds and 2 minutes to get a response from that prompt. Now, that's not absolutely horrible when you know it's running, that it's free. It's just running on your own hardware, right? How many of you would be upset if ChatGPT took 2 minutes to give you an answer to something not that complicated? They wouldn't be all that happy. Now, how many people use ChatGPT at the same time? A lot. A lot of people. How many people are using DeepSeek on my computer at one time? Just me. And it's taken 2 minutes to get a response. This is until last week, actually, it's not actually quite out yet. This is the best AI personal machine you can purchase. What's sitting here? Just because of that VRAM thing, the unified memory thing. You can't run something as a prosumer at home better than this, and it can help one person run a large model in 2 minutes. That's called inference. When you give it a prompt and it has to think about it and give you a response, that's called inference. So if the best thing you can possibly run can run a pretty good model slowly for one person, that kind of gives you the idea of the difference between what we're dealing with running our own stuff and what's happening in the cloud, taking up zillions of dollars, blah, blah, blah. Go ahead.
Maybe slightly tangent, but I've been interested in this. Like if you, like you said, if you download any app or, the anti-hands rewards app is going to have like an AI embedded. Highly doubt that they've invested in their own data centers. So they have to be pulling from how many companies exist that can have that transfer so that like Home Depot have their own AI on their website. How many like grandpa companies exist so that companies can pull that?
Well, probably a lot. So, I mean, like, for example, like we have this tool here called Boodlebox.
Right.
Boodlebox has their own little internal model, but really what they do is they say, hey, we have negotiated with Anthropic and OpenAI a rate.
Yeah.
We're going to charge our customers a higher rate.
Right.
And hopefully they don't use it anywhere near as much as Lippman with his automation tools. so they're just making API calls to it, which become kind of expensive. So a place like Home Depot with their AI, they might be making API calls to like ChatGPT Nano or something like that, or even ChatGPT Mini. They probably negotiated a yearly rate or something because those models already don't cost that much. They are more than powerful enough. I mean, you would not notice the difference between the most expensive ChatGPT model and ChatGPT 5 Mini if you're just talking about give us information about Home Depot's website. Right. You wouldn't be able to tell the difference between the two of them, except ChatGPT, their higher model will be slower.
Yeah.
But that's probably what they're doing. They're using other people's plugins for chatbots, that kind of stuff. So anyways, Anthropic, the makers of Claude, they went after Claudebot and they said, well, I mean, who knows how nice it was initially. They may have started off with their lawyer saying, hey, we would encourage you to change your name. Nicely. And then it might have become more of a bullying type of thing. So they changed their name. First, they changed it to Molt Claw because it's like a claw, like lobsters, and lobsters molt. That lasted 5 minutes. Nobody liked that name.
Nobody.
Yeah. So now they're called Open Claw because Claude Bot, when said out loud, sounds like it's a tool made by Claude, Anthropic people, when it's not. And here's the irony. Everybody and their brother is racing towards this agentic thing now. And every single program, Unity is going to have it in 5 minutes, right? They're going to have an AI thing built into it. Um, so, what's funny about this, and this happened during the same time, if you've been following the news, where the government was in negotiations with Anthropic, the makers of Claude, and wanted them to like lower all their guardrails that like we have. We can't tell it to do dangerous things. Claude or ChatGPT, all those will say, "Hey, I'm not going to tell you how to kill yourself," and like they have protections in there, right? So, but the government wanted Claude to drop these protections because they were using it for data mining things like targets for war and stuff like that. Just for them. Yeah, just for them. And Claude ethically said, no, we can't do that. Now, this is a $1 zillion company, so the government can't really bully them too much. But what the government ended up doing is they said, oh, well, not only are we no longer talking to you, we're also banning your product in the entire government. So Claude's back at the table chatting now. But in the meantime, OpenAI ChatGPT people swooped in, made a deal with the government. I think they both were already working with the government. So the government is tied into all these models because there isn't like a best model. Certain models are better at certain things. And every 5 minutes, there's a new king of coding in the models, but all of them, all the top tier models are pretty good. So anyways, the irony there is that the thing that started off as something Anthropic was concerned about because it sounded too close to Claude is now actually owned by the ChatGPT people. It's hard to keep track of all this in your head, right? Which then became kind of an interesting thing because I mentioned OpenClaw. So now if I jump over here real quick to a terminal. All right, let me shrink this and then make the text bigger. Is that decent enough? We can see it? All right. So, um, well, it doesn't matter if I'm in this directory. This will be for Claude Code. But so I have a program. I've downloaded OpenClaw into my computer. There is a web interface to OpenClaw that you can use, but frankly, command line is better. So that's another thing. If you're not comfortable with command line thing, which most younger technology people today aren't, get familiar with Claude with command line. Like we said it tongue in cheek, so he sat here in coding one talking about, oh, Linux should be your main, stuff like that. There's something to be said for that. You know, Linux was my main years and years and years ago when Linux wasn't what it is today. You used to have to, compile it and stuff yourself, which felt cool because even today, though, Linux makes you feel like you're actually using your computer. Yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily disagree because it empowers you to do stuff. Because you put a command line in front of a lot of even computer science students and be, okay, I don't want to break anything, right? We're used to button clicks and drop down menus and stuff like that. But if you can get comfortable with command line, there's a lot of value in that. So I installed OpenClaw in here, which is a command line, a single line. You can download it, and I'll go ahead and do an OpenClaw update. Let's just see what the newest version of this is. So it'll go ahead and do a quick pull. And just to show you why this guy's going to have Telegram open. So I talk to my Claude bot via chat message. I use Telegram. So I can text my bots that are running on my machine, my agents, from anywhere in the world. Tell it to go do work for me. And this program sitting on my computer will go and start doing stuff. All right. So it tried to download something. It hasn't changed, blah, blah, blah. It restarted the service, whatever. Now I'm going to do OpenClaw configure. All right. So this is a newer version of OpenClaw. This is something that came out post the merger, the acquisition by OpenAI. I think what happened is OpenAI hired the maker of OpenClaw with some sort of, I'm guessing, ridiculous signing bonus that came with him turning the project over to them. The project's still open source, by the way. But in any case, so I can go and I can set this up. I'm gonna say, oh, I want OpenClaw to run locally here in this computer. Then when you go choose your models, okay, so you have all these models you can choose from. I can choose OpenAI. The first thing it'll, well, I'll get to OpenAI here in a second. If I choose Anthropic, actually same thing there. It'll let me hook it up to Claude code. I assume actually. No, it doesn't. But that's okay. So here's all these models you can use. But OpenAI and Anthropic are companies that have a bunch of models. But I'm going to click on OpenAI here because this is the cool new thing that I'm guessing most of you don't have paid ChatGPT accounts. For 20 bucks a month, you can connect your OpenAI account to this and use OpenAI or use ChatGPT 5.4 Codex for free. Well, for 20 bucks a month. And it's not unlimited. You get a lot of usage in like 5-hour windows, but you could do quite a bit with this for 20 bucks a month. It is by far the cheapest way of messing with OpenClaw without running into hundreds of dollars of bills. If you set it up using only Codex, it will run until the API doesn't work anymore. Then it'll tell you, hey, you're out of quota, wait a little bit and try again later. So it's a little bit cloak and dagger in terms of what does later mean, where the other tool we're going to look at today tells you the exact time, but I have a feeling that behind the scenes, these are very similar arrangements. So you have the OpenAI people offering you to use their agentic tool called ClaudeBot or called OpenClaw using a OAuth login to ChatGPT with your $20 a month account, so that you can now use this guy with the smartest brain you can install in it on the background without surprise charges. It'll just stop running before it starts charging you more. All right. It's the best way to experience this, even if you just do it for a month. All right. So you can connect OpenClaw up to your Codex. Until you've done that, I would not put an API key in here. You will get surprised by how much it will cost. Now, later on, once you really know how this thing works, you might decide, hey, I actually want to throw an API key in here because sometimes I might want to use a different model or whatever. But I think you're going to get a lot of runway out of it just like this once you figure out the right tool to use for it. But anyways, you can go in here, you can pick, here, I'm going to choose Google. You could put in your API key for this. So it says, you know, you could paste your API key there. I'm just going to type in some stuff, pretending like that was my API key. All right, so now you see it puts me into the Gemini thing, so I can go through and I can choose. So notice I have Gemini 3.1 Pro Preview selected as something available to me in here. But you just notice here, these are all the models from there's Grok, Hugging Face, which has a lot of free ones, Min-Max, Mistral, which is a local one. Olama is going to be popping up here. That's the thing you can run. Well, actually, the Olama, I think, might come in through a different thing. But in any case, that's how you can set that guy up. And then when you go to run him, you text him through Telegram. You can go to the web interface and talk to it too, but you can text him through Telegram and tell him what to do, like you're talking to ChatGPT, except you're talking to the bot that lives on your computer it is an agent that has access to your computer, everything on your computer. And you'll learn pretty quickly there are certain things you can trust it for. There are other things you really can't trust it for. Now, so now let me start the little journey of what I did this weekend. So and funny enough, so I've mentioned in here before that I'm culturally I'm Jewish, and my dad is one of seven brothers, all doctors and lawyers. So there's stereotype stuff here. So my uncle Richie, this is really going keep it. So he was a patent attorney in Washington D.C. He lived next to Clarence Thomas, who was a Supreme Court judge. Um, well, so anyways, so he had a patent attorney business, and he did a lot of work with these universities in the Middle East. So he had built up a relationship. So for years, he was doing all the patents for like King Faisal University, these big research universities in like Saudi Arabia and stuff like that. So his name meant something there. Well, he sold his patent business to a company, back in like 2016. Now he stayed on as like a patent attorney on their website, but he wasn't doing any real work. He was just a face on there for, but they now own the company. Well, what came with that was not use of his name. Well, so what happened is it started earlier, but the judges said the statute of limitations goes back to 2020, like June of 2020, where there was 400 and some odd instances out of 904 patents for universities in Saudi Arabia where this place he sold his business to used his name on the front page to get the patent, to get them chosen as the patent attorney, yet then switch the name later in the document for who is actually the attorney on file. So they were using his name without, for millions of dollars worth of money. Well, so anyways, my uncle contacted me and said, "Hey, I know they were doing this. I have a couple of examples, but do you have anything you can help for like data acquisition or whatever?" So I started with OpenClaw. I told my guy, gave him all the constraints. I said, "Here's the situation. Here's all the data I have to start with. Go start finding me data that we can use to prove this case." So it did that for like 2 days. Just gathered stuff. This was using like ChatGPT Mini, whatever. And then I had it generating a kind of an HTML based report. And that, my uncle could then click through to like visualize the data that it collected because there was hundreds of PDFs and stuff. But then what happened is it started making stuff up, like you've heard of AIs doing. So that's something that I have noticed from OpenClaw, unless you're running the better models. So this was before I discovered you can log in with, actually, I don't think it was before I discovered it. It was after I had run out of quota. So I was using a different model to do this mining. Well, so then I decided, okay, well, I'm not going to trust this anymore, but we've gathered a bunch of data. For 2 days, we've gathered data, and the data has got to be useful. We had PDFs and, OCR stuff where it did text recognition, optical text recognition. So I brought that whole directory into Cursor, and I told Cursor, go and look at this directory. And I gave it the starting point, and I said, go and look and figure out what we currently have. And then here's the case we're trying to build. So Cursor started doing that, and man, Cursor was good. I didn't think it could get better than Cursor. So Cursor put together this case. It generated two separate packages, one for like what to take into the meeting when you're trying to like get them to settle outside of court, showing like, here's a picture of bad guy's physical signature on one of these like red-handed stuff, but things you would have had to dig for, things that would have taken a human being forever to do, or they may not have found it, like needle in the haystack. So that was working well. And then I decided to play with this other tool. Let's see. I'm not going to go. Oh, first of all, you can see it up here. Do you see how this says dangerously skip permissions for Claude? So I'm not going to click on that one because I think I might not want you to see what I was working on in that one. What was this one? Oh, this one's so good, but man, don't tell anybody. Like kind of seriously. All right, so this is, oh my gosh. Well, it's up. That's up. So I took it into Claude Code. Actually, I'm not going to tell you what this is for. I'll just let you use your imagination. So I took it into Claude Code. So here's Claude Code. So when you run it, so here, there's an example where I run out of API credits. So I had to tell it, told me, come back at 7 p.m. and then you can do more of this. Well, so there's a product called Claude Code, which is from Anthropic. It's like Claude. Now you can download Claude Code, the application, which lets you do something similar to Cursor. You have this own little user interface thing. You can also do it through the app on the phone. You could do it through the web, but you can download Claude Code command line interface to your computer. Sits locally on your computer. So it's sort of kind of like OpenClaw, but it has less access to individual tools, but it still has quite a bit of access um, because it's physically running on your computer, not running within an application that's running on your computer. So it has access to stuff. And you can give it more access to stuff, especially if you tell it to dangerously skip permissions and just do whatever it wants. Huh? It's a command line argument. Yeah, so it's just Claude space dash dash dangerously dash skip dash permissions. And it just rolls. Um, so anyways, I install Claude Code. When you first install it, it links with so I paid the $20 a month for access to Claude, which comes with access to Claude Code, very similarly to how ChatGPT's $20 a month thing comes with access to Codex, ChatGPT's Codex. So now we're kind of comparing ClaudeBot backed by OpenAI's Codex versus Claude, or yeah, Claw, no, I'm sorry, OpenClaw powered by OpenAI's ChatGPT Codex versus Claude Code command line, which is downloaded on my computer, that is powered by Claude Code. It's probably a ChatGPT Opus or Sonic Codex type thing, whatever its coding thing is. So anyways, I can give this guy prompts right here. I give it the full context or whatever. And then I press enter. And if I've done that permissions thing, I can just walk off. Now, if I don't do the permissions thing, which is definitely encouraged especially until you become crazy, you can sit there and babysit it a little bit until it gets past where it's asking you for permission to certain things. Then it'll just run on its own for a while. But so anyways, I dropped that directory in there, which already had, a ridiculous amount of documents that it downloaded and also stuff it had already put together. So I dropped it in there. I made a duplicate of the directory because now it was Cursor versus this guy. And I said, hey, go ahead and learn what this directory is doing. So that burned through like all my quota for that 5 hours. And it said, okay, come back at 2 p.m. You could do more. So I came back at 2 p.m. And now that it had figured out what was in the directory, I said, hey, here's the case we're building, blah, 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 go and do work. Oh my gosh, it found so much more. It found like ties from like European people. It found like this underling at the law firm who was signing on behalf of the other guy after the previous what was called arbitration, where they had an agreement. So they continued to do it after the agreement, but by way of this inside employee that nobody knew of. And oh, Claude Code found it found so much. It was absolutely ridiculous. And then it put together this two different documents, one to take into the room to argue with, to get the $1 million settlement, and then the other one for the back end lawyers. But no human being could have done what this did in an hour. It was stupid. Go ahead.
Is it a U.S. law firm or a Saudi?
It's a U.S. law firm. So if you go to littmanlaw.com, it probably now forwards to the new guys who own it. The main guy is Goldberg. A lot of Jewish people involved here. Big surprise. So, yeah, so it's a U.S. patent firm that, when you have research institutions who are doing research and stuff and they have things they want to patent, well, the law firms are competing for their business to help them do the legal work for the patents. So my uncle from years ago, I remember him when I was a kid flying out to United Emirates and stuff like that, and so he built the relationship with all these places over 25 years. So his name meant something, and these guys then took advantage of that. So, I mean, we'll see what the deal ends up being, but I'm thinking maybe a 10% cut.
Oh, it's still going.
Well, he has the thing now, so now he's going to take the guys into a room and show them the evidence and see if they want to settle. So maybe, well, I mean, that's how cases. I mean, how many times does somebody sue Microsoft that you ever see a court case? No, there's a check. That thing never goes to court. For the big companies, I mean, people want to demonize Microsoft, but if you're some kid who used Cursor to write code in your basement, and then Microsoft comes and steals it, you turn around and sue Microsoft, they give you $5 million, you go away and buy pants. Right? I mean, that's how business works. Because you could have never taken it to market like Microsoft can. Take your 5 million and walk. Yeah, so everything gets settled. But anyways, those are some tools for you to play with, some of the things to kick around. Be careful. These are powerful tools that can get you into trouble, but where we are with automation right now is scary. This is where that white hat hacking thing comes in. We need to know how these tools work and the risks they can have so that when people come up and say, oh, I heard about OpenClaw, can you help me install it on my computer? You can tell them this is dangerous. Don't do it. But you all should do it and just play with fire. So, all right. I will see everybody on Tuesday. You have a who? Huh? Why don't we have class Thursday? Oh, yeah. See you Thursday.
I emailed you about.
Yeah, you're fine.
Okay. Great. Well, it was fun.
I believed you. How do I end this? Oh, give me 1 second. Oh, there we go.